Well, when we set it up over at Ed or Joe's place, it won't take that long.
Well, that's so much easier down there that there's so many different things that we can see down there, like down where the old cemetery is, and down there where we were born, and then how the old road crossed there, and how all the people camped up and down besides our place.
Yeah.
And there was no stage road, too. And the Indians that lived in through here was, as I tell them down at the culture outfit, the Indians never lived in like these houses.
Yeah.
They all had their places different along there. Like go up there to Crow Creek and you start there by the highway where Alec Beaver had there, and then you cross that and an old guy by the name of No Tobacco, he lived right close to where the highway crosses, and then a couple of them Queequeg Sioux lived there, and then Sophie Irvin's family, and old Chief Eagle, and now an old man Hammond, and they all had different places. In the winter time, lots of times we'd wonder where they were. One time I said to my mother, I said, I wonder where old so-and-so is. Oh, she says, he's in the timber. So the ones that had the places out on the creek, they'd move into the timber because they were closer to woods and they were in the shelter from the wind and everything.
Yeah.
And they'd stay there till spring broke and then go back down on their places. Old grizzly bear lived down there close to Beaver Heads, and right across from that dairy is where Indian by the name of Little Andrews, Antilles, Indians call him. He lived there. That's just close to where Olson has his home there. And then over there where the old road passed by where Doc Brooks's place is, that's where an Indian by the name of Ignace Snowhead lived. And his old lady, every spring, she'd go down a mouth of Spring Creek. And she had a fish trap down there. And she knew just when them big trout was coming up, she'd go down there. And I know we lived right close to her place. When I went to school, I was about 10 years old. And stayed with my aunt. They'd left the old Hudson Bay Post in Fort Colville and moved up here. So I stayed with them, and she was old Snowhead's wife, and she'd bring my aunt a couple of them. And I told them wildlife guys 2, 3 times. I even told Tom that. As heck, I said, I bet you go down there, you can still find markings of hers where she had her traps. And that's the only time that I ever ate muskrat.
Oh.
She brought one to my aunt. I remember she roasted.
How was it?
Well, I guess it was all right. I was just a kid then.
Eat anything.
And right where Brooks lived, that's where Philip, we used to call him Philip Inyas. He used to work for my dad a lot. That his last name on the roll was Pierre. And after his wife died, and John Peter Paul's mother was single, after old Carmel got killed, why he married her, and that's where he lived when he died. Old Carmel, that was John Peter Paul's dad.
Yeah.
He just lived north of there, about a mile, a little over. I think there's a housing there they call Clarice Paul's housing. Well, that's where old Carmel Paul was living when he got killed over there in the Swan River, and that mixed up with the game wardens.
That's where Roy Big Crane lives.
Huh?
Roy Big Crane lives over there.
Oh. And
let me just check this one thing. Make sure we got. Yeah, it should be all set. Okay. Excuse me.
yeah, that's where he lived, and the Indians in the fall of the year that go by our place with pack outfits and maybe 25, 30 head of stock in their saddle horses. And they'd run through St. Mary's, and then they'd take a trail, I think it was in the North Fork of Jocko, and they'd come out up there, they call Lindenberg Lake now. And that's where they do their hunting, between there and that Holland Lake country. And then when I get all the deer that they wanted, the meat dried, and a lot of hides, why then they'd all move back here. They'd have their bitter camas and all that choke cherry stuff, and their dried meat and everything for their winter. And the time old Carmel was over there, him and his wife, and I believe the story went, I think Clarice was packing old John Peter Paul in just just before he was born, because they were right close to Harlan Lake, and my cousin went there one time watching. Father showed him where it was. Like a damn chump, I never went over there. Now culture wants to find it, and they don't know where to go. And no Carmel here, and I think old Yellow Mountain was one of them. I believe he was killed in it. This old Stewie and his boy. I used to play with his boy when we were kids. And they were all killed there. And Clarice got on her horse, and whoever was with this game warden, he tried to head her off, and she beat him to this turn in the trail, and she went up towards Lindbergh Lake, and that's where you spend me in a bunch of them was camped. Told them what happened, and then they all went down there and kind of took care of the bodies till I could bring them back over here. Yeah. And this Peyton, the game warden, he was the one that was wounded, and he was down, and I guess he's still a shooting. And the old priest Paul's one, they said that grabbed the rifle and she finished him off. And then they all come back, and then later on, I think it was why, although you Finley and a bunch of them guys, they went and brought their bodies back to Mission and buried them. And so they, and Inyas Conto lived over in here, about only for 4 or 5 miles over there. And Baptist Huoncorn, I don't think you know him. He lived at Dixon. He used to interpret Kootenai and Flathead. And he worked around the agency a lot. And that's where his mother lived. And up there where the...
You know Rob Sand, right?
Huh?
Rob Sand.
Oh.
How you doing?
Hi, gee.
It's been a while since I've seen you.
Long time since I seen you.
Isn't this a fine place?
Huh?
Isn't this a fine place here?
Yeah.
This is probably is this on camera right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Boy.
I'll let you get on with this.
You're recorded.
All he has to do is sit here and grow long whiskers and
Yeah.
watch the sun come up.
Yeah. Yeah, Joe McDonald stopped in here one day, and he was saying that as a kid he used to hang around up and down in here. And,
This used to be the damnedest fishing creek you ever seen.
it was?
Jesus, you could. Lots of times your old fly wouldn't hardly touch the water. We never got any, bigger or not.
Yeah.
But sometimes we'd come up here and we could smell the bears so much. And then a couple of kids seen bears down low, so we stayed up.
I saw some bears right in that gully over there about a week ago.
Yeah. Yeah, geez, there used to be a lot of fish here. And it's quite a little stream. Then, of course, the irrigation is what done her up.
Yeah.
Like down there by our place, we had 2 creeks. One under the hill right by the house. That's where we got water. My dad built a milk house over the creek. Had a hole cut in the middle, and us kids used to throw clabbered milk and stuff. Them all trout that big and be laying in there, just thick. Start throwing that stuff and then be right there waiting for
They
him.
like that, huh?
And then over in the big creek, at times it would get pretty big. I know a couple of times that my dad had to cross, look at some cattle. He's living on the foothill. He hit swimming water in a couple of places. It get pretty rough in it. Then when the irrigation started, that's when things went down.
Yeah, did this run a lot higher much of the time?
Huh?
Did Marsh Creek run a lot higher? I guess it used to be called Finley Creek, right?
Oh yeah, this little creek here seems to stay pretty near the same. But it might have been another branch of it up there right where it come out of the timber there, or took it away, part of it away from there. But I never did remember seeing this little creek too high, but
Yeah.
probably places that deep, maybe that wide, but that's about the size of it.
Places that were good
Yeah,
Good for the fish.
and the water is awful cold right down where it went into Post Creek by my granddad's. There's a nice, great big hole there. Geez, that'd be a dandy place to swim. Geez, they got in there and that old Finley Creek water was just ice cold. Tried it a couple of times, but I don't know, it must have originally come right off in the glacier or something.
Warheads up there.
Stayed that way all the time. And my granddad used to run a lot of horses between these two creeks. Of course, I was telling Tom from Post Creek clear to the river, there was no timber or no trees. It was just one big prairie.
Yeah.
All kinds of wildlife out there. Lots of hawks, golden eagles, bald eagles, lots of buzzards. Geez, you can ride out on that prairie and pretty soon you'd see 3, 4 of them circling around. You know, there was a dead animal there someplace. And waterfowl of about every kind you can imagine was there. Frogs. We didn't have any, there was no 9 pipe then, and all of them, we used to call them lakes, now they call them potholes. You go around one of them potholes and you just chuck full of frogs all the way around there.
You don't see many frogs there.
And then some of them have a muskrat den and uh, coyotes, a lot of them, skunk, stuff like that. And down towards the Buffalo Park, there's a place down there, right straight across from where the admission nose was.
Yeah.
Out at towards Buffalo Park there. And it's quite a place for curlews. And you go down there in the spring of the year and they just scare the heck out of you. They just come right down putting your hit your hat when they're nesting.
Yeah.
And there's just lots of them.
What did you call
Curlew.
it?
They were pretty good sized little birds. And they had a kind of a nice hollow to them when they'd holler. There's just a few once in a while, I think, shows up in Moe's yet. And over at Narada, where my cousin lived, there was about 7 or 8 used to come back and nest there. But they never did game. I don't know what the reason was. But down here when we were kids, geez, it'd just be sickening heck. And of course, at that time, there was a lot of wild horses out there. And animals had plenty to eat.
Yeah.
And I was telling them, we even used to get a frog about that long. Big green frog, black spots on it. And Ludington family, they were raised on a boat house down in Astoria, Oregon. When they moved out there, a lot when why I got the first thing they done, they were having frog legs out there all the time. So there was some old butcher in Roman. He gave them 2 pounds of meat for a pound of frog legs.
Yeah.
And down there, meadow, they used to be a lot of them down there. Oh, they're all gone. Pheasants are all gone. Prairie chickens are all gone. Yeah. take along these creeks here and spring they use drumming all along here. And a lot of prairie chickens.
Now that when you say pheasants, were the when did the Chinese pheasant come in, and what did you have before that?
I think the Chinese pheasant come in here sometime in the 20s. I think the first bunch after, well, when I went to school in Small, Oregon in 1912, and there was 2 Chinese pheasants around there. And then I had a aunt, a cousin that lived at Lapway, Idaho. And I think she said they come in there about in the 20s. And she said they had a heck of a time with them. She said, there are many of them. And she said the only thing they can keep that kind of kept them away was guinea hens. So she kept a guinea hen or 2 with her chicken.
Now, could you talk again about why you think things like the prairie chicken got and the frogs got wiped out?
I think first thing is progress in style of farming. I mean, for many years before, well, it started when this damn calf industry got in, where everybody could make more money selling weaner calves. Before that, over home, we'd gather beef and fall of the year, long about in August, I guess we'd start. We never sold nothing but 2 and 3-year-old steers and dry cows. Well, after they found out they could make more money, I guess, selling calves and irrigate pasture, why, that took all the farming out of him. Only he lived on there at Post Creek. Hell, I could stand there by the house and see 4 trash machines all working. There wouldn't be none of them over 3 miles from our place. A lot of grain raised. Now everybody went that way, and I think a lot of that irrigation and type of farming and grazing, I think, is what took a lot of it out. And then later years, pesticide, I think, took it out. Because over home, my father-in-law used to have, I bet you, 8 or 10 bluebird nests around his cellar. He had a little nest on each side of his outside toilet. Out of his barn around, and had bluebird nests all over there. And my brother-in-law has been dead about 4 years, I think, 5. And he said the year before he passed away, there was just one old male come back. And I think just following their own animals, kind of getting them to come back.
What year did your brother-in-law die?
I just can't remember. It was Christmas. He died over in Billings with his, over there visiting his daughters. And after my father and my mother died, he run the ranch. It wasn't much of a ranch. He run about 30, 40 like that. He run a school bus every year.
I was also wondering, you were talking about the hunting camps going by the place there in the fall. And people going up and over the missions.
Oh yeah, I was just telling him about that go by her. Oh, his Finley up there and his family, and Chief Eagle's family, Quickly Sue's, and old Hammers and all them. They'd go by our old place there, Ed's place. That was the main road when we were kids. And so they'd go by our place and up by St. Mary's Lake. And then they'd cut off there in the North Fork and they'd come out at what they call Lindenburg Lake now. The Indians used to call it Elbow Lake, I think. And then they'd go on down towards Holland Lake. And after they got all the meat and stuff they wanted, and then they'd come home. And that's what was on one of them trips when and fellas got killed by the game warden over there.
Now, about what was the last time you can remember those hunting trips going over the missions like that?
Well, that I can't remember what year that was. 1907 or 8, I think.
Yeah, that was 1908, but I'm just wondering.
I don't think they went over there 2, 3 times after that. Because there were quite a few of these old time Indians over here. They were pretty much riled up, I guess, for a while. They thought it'd been an open season on the game warden. And I think that kept them out of there. Of course, Camas Ferry Indians, they'd go the other way. They'd go Thompson River, fishing all over in there. And then go down towards the 9 Mile and Petty Creek and all them places. And some of the older Indians. See, my folks, after the treaty was signed in 55, and R. Lee, the guy, one of them signed it. Charlo claimed right after he left there that they forged his name. And he wouldn't move. So R. Lee moved in the 80s, I think, early 80s or 70s. And then people like my granddad and his family, that's when they come out. All my mother, brothers, and sisters was all born up there, but the one younger boy, Marion, he was born down here. And I think my granddad settled across the creek from our place about 1879 somewhere. Charlo, he never gave up till 91. And my grandmother, my mom's side, she was born at Stevensville. And her dad was, I guess, an old hunter for fortune, one thing, because his name was Rogers. He was part Indian from the east somewhere. And that was her dad, and I don't know if Charlo and mother and her mother were sisters or what, they're real close related. And so when Charlo come out there, a lot of the Montiers moved out of there. Claremont moved out of there. My granddad and uh, I think my grandmother, she used to tell us, of course, kids, they won't pay any attention. She'd tell you about where she'd be. Sometimes around Green River, Wyoming, some other place. And she said her and her sister laid on a knoll and watched some other tribe having a funeral deal. They had the funeral for this guy, killed his horse, cut the woman's hair. She said, hey, well, what's that when they're kids? And she used to talk a lot of sleeping child. I guess they spend a lot of time up there. Because every once in a while she started telling us something about country up there, and she'd always mention something they done at sleeping child.
Did they use the hot springs up there?
I suppose maybe they did. Maybe that's why they're up there. And I suppose he hunted there. Uh, that's how she always told that story about sleeping child getting its name. And there was a woman picking berries or something. She had the baby hanging on a limb on a tree and a baby board. She said the baby started crying. Coyote come along. He tried to humor it. Couldn't get nothing done. He'd dance, he'd sing, performed all kinds of things. And finally, by the time she got there, baby was going to sleep, had his paw in her mouth. That's how she went to sleep. That's why she always called a sleeping child.
Now, Charlie, there's not snow on the ground yet, but isn't that a coyote story?
Huh?
I thought you were supposed to wait till there's snow.
Oh, that's all bullshit. Some of them culture outfits that's culture outfits just scratch the surface of what's happening. Darling never knew much about that. Best one they have down there is Harriet Whitworth. She lived that old life right through. No, there's a lot of them. Then I had an aunt from around that. And she was raised down there in Tulane, Washington, close to Republic. She belonged to, well, as part of the Spokane tribe. She used to tell how they got the wild plums at Dixon. And the coyote was coming up the river and made friends with the salmon. So they come up the river and the salmon told him he'd get him a wife. When they got up to the mouth of the Jocko, he didn't do any producing, made the coyote mad, and he threw all these wild plum bushes down there, and that's where they grew from.
I have a question, and it's just something I've been guessing at. But when you were saying about coyote stories, do you think that taboo that some people say that there is about saying them this time of year has to do with just telling the children to wait until wintertime when there's time to tell stories?
Oh, I think that deal was just, the old people had nothing to do. They're kind of bunched up in lawyers, snow on the ground, nothing to do. So I think that's what they done, just to amuse themselves. So I could figure it, and that's the way it was when I was a kid. I never heard of that winter deal. Of course, they had done different things like this medicine dance, blue jays. That was always in the winter. And then the at their prayer dance, or some call it, oh, they had different names, jump dance. They have that right at New Year's. This old Joe Finley up there, he used to be a great place for him. Now the Whitneys is the only one that's lived up to it. And they're building themselves quite a big building up there. They said it's getting so people from all over different states, even from Alaska's come to that. It's getting so big that their hall wouldn't hold them. But they're pretty strong. It's kind of a sacred deal. When they all get there, they have their prayers and shake hands with everybody, wish them the best. And then after all that, and have their first meal, then they start to dance. And that's just a jumping dance. A lot of them call it blacktail dance. And the different ones get up and sing his song and dance.
I can see why they call it blacktail dance.
Yeah.
Charlie, you were talking about the Bitterroot a couple minutes ago, and I was just thinking that this year is the 100th anniversary of that removal in 1891. Now it's 1991. The Culture Committee was thinking of doing some kind of something to mark that 100th anniversary. And do you have any ideas of something that ought to be done?
Well, I think it'd be nice to have something, but the way it works out, I heard Clarence day before yesterday, he said something about they're going to have some kind of memorial up at the old cemetery, Stevensville. I think the 14th. They're putting up some kind of a stone up there. But you can't tell what the hell they're going to do. It's just like they've got this big $2 million grant or whatever it is to build this nice museum.
Yeah.
And they were asking us here a month or two ago our thoughts when they come to me, and I said, hell, the Jesuits started a mission. There's historical churches there. They have the land, they have the water, they have the sewer. Build it here. Now they're going to build it up there next to Forts Lake.
Yeah.
Who the hell's going to drive 10 miles over there to go to a museum?
It's gonna be by Sports Lake.
Huh?
I didn't know where it was gonna end up.
Well, that's where it's going to be. They're going to have on this west boundary, they're going to have the buildings. And then I heard they said they're going to make walkways on both sides of the lake. No vehicles in there and it.
Okay. Pretty place.
Yeah.
So, Charlie, you said that this at one time was all Alec Bonaparte's land,
Yeah.
his allotment. Maybe you could tell me something about that.
Well, old Alec was my dad's, I think he was his uncle. And he had two sons' eyes got one apart from Mose. And Moses Lotman went up here, joined onto the highway on the south where Harley Shepherd lived. And I think old Alex was out in here someplace, and Isaacs was out. And they were really nice person. And old Alec, I used to be with him when I was a little boy. He'd go fishing and put me on a horse, and then he'd tie something around me and him so I wouldn't fall off. He's crippled, kind of walked on his toe. He'd go along for 3-4 years and he'd just get deathly sick. He'd send for my dad, he'd go over where he was at, and they'd glance that hip, and the old guy would be all right then for quite a while, and there was a bullet hole in his hip. And he used to whistle bugle call. And then he'd say, then they come. And I didn't know if he was with Joseph or he was in some other scrape. And that's how he come to live up here, but they're in this person.
You know how he would have lost the allotment? Do you know the story of that or anything?
Well, it's just like all the others. They went down to the agency and applied for a patent, and they got it. And that was the main deal. The representatives and all them had good political friends that wanted some of this good land, so they had to work on them. Then they forced patent on them. That was in 1919, I think. And my aunt and uncle had that ranch over there in Nevada. Of course, they had a hell of a big outfit at one time. They never took out the patent. So Jesus and Banks, Kalispell, Mercantile are trying to get that holding because it's a hell of a nice ranch. And then Angus died, and I helped gather the stock for the estate. I think I gathered up, I suppose, around 700 head of horses and a lot of nice horses. Horses now, it's a damn much part of being pretty and everything, palomino, whites and everything. Whereas I think they're credited $4 a round as well. And my aunt, she had a bunch of, we called them pets. Some of them black broccoli-faced cows and some big old blue roan. And by golly, we sold all them. I forget. I think I sold 102 head. I believe it was $28 a round for them cows.
Gee.
So anyhow, they got her over post to the bank, and they wanted her to sign a contract with them. She said, my contract wouldn't be any good to you. She said, I'm still a ward of the government. So the attorney with Kalispell outfit, they said, oh, we told you that, you wouldn't listen. So She says, if you leave us alone, she said, we'll pay it off when we sell cattle. And Angus, the boy that's over there at the ranch now, just before he went to the World War One or two, about a year or two before he died, he paid it off, $40,000. Then he
Managed to fight off of that force feed that.
Then he come back and took over the, well, he run the ranch before, and he started taking over the ranch. His brother was going to school in high school, and then after he got out, he went to university. He took the ranch over when he was about 19, I guess, or 20. So he come back, started to run the ranch again. Didn't last long, and he got that MS, they call it, cirrhosis. And he said it started on him while he was in Europe, he said. And now he just lays in bed. He can't move at all. He's been that way since 45. And my cousin, his niece, Maggie, she's got the old ranch now. She takes care. His mind's there. Because I walked in there one day and spoke to him. He knew who I was. But he just,
Can he talk?
no,
No.
no,
Just kind of shake his head, or
just thumb still.
how'd you know he knew who you were?
Oh, and I walked up to him. I got him by the hand. He says, Charlie Mack. And I said, yeah. That's what he used to call me every once in a while.
Oh, that's cool. I was wondering if you could tell me something about the Finley that lived right up here.
Oh, to know him? Oh, he raised quite a bunch of horses. And he was got to be quite a friendly chef. An old man chef come into Ronan, settled there before the homesteaders again. And then he moved down and he lived right there where Harlan came. And they got to be real chums. And, uh, quite an old guy, he farmed some, had a lot of horses. And old Joe Kennedy, he was about the same.
So you said in the old days, all these guys had their own places instead of living all bunched up.
Oh yeah, sure. Each one, they go up there in the car and you just pick out all their places. And up there on the hill, right straight across there, where that Ball Hill is, where that fancy big house is up on that hill, well, there's an engine by the name of Finley. Sonoma Finley, they called it. That's where he'd have the big medicine dance in the winter. Usually sleighs and horsebackers coming in to beat heck.
I thought Tanam Finley was the one who lived right.
Well, that's Tanom over here. This was Sinom, they call it. And then right close to us was another old Finley, they call it Old Big Johnny Finley. And then our place, and then you went on by Louis Camille and Bushman, Old Redhorn, place like, it was just a few places. Up this way, Howard, went in the rooms there. Conco is back in there. And Baptist One Corn's wife, mother and outfit was there. And two, three others, I just can't remember now. Redhorns. But they all lived that way, and I could never figure out how most of their places is up away from the creeks. So doing road work down there at Ed's, and Mike Delaware was running the cat farm. He's a full blood from Marlene. And he had his lodge and everything up on the bank there above Ed's house. And cousin Rita and her husband, they had a nice little place down in the bottom.
Yeah.
And I tried to get him to move down there.
Yeah.
No, he says, I don't move down there. He says, you know why I don't want to move there? He says, you build your camp where it's dry. He says, you never have bugs or nothing around you. He says, you go down there in that bottom, there'll be bugs. And if you don't watch your bed and clothes, why it will mold on you. So that's why all these old Indian places all the way away from the creek.
Seemed like they always had a smart reason for doing what they did.
Yeah, it's just too bad everything happened that way, because when I was a kid, when these old Indians here never lived in want, they had all their own meat, hides, places for their horses, lived close to the timber for the wood, and lots of fish if they wanted them, and all that kind of stuff. So,
It seemed like if you had your own place and you're living out there that way, you wouldn't need money so much.
no, no, they didn't. The big deal was on the horse roundup. First horse roundup would start over here where that big golf course is now in Mud Creek, a little Sloan place. And then they'd move down there to our place, and that'd last 2 weeks there. There'd be hundreds of horses and all over that flat. And a lot of fellas would be getting their horses, and that was out in some of them bunches, and a lot of fellas go out there and they get them to ride, and when they come in, they could either take a slick of your horse or so much money. A lot of them guys take a horse, and then the horse buyer there, and you buy their horse, and then play stick game all night. You know, oh, maybe 50, 60 counts, something like that. And then when they get done there, by the next move, they go down to Mission Menzies and Father's Corral over there. That's when they'd get Valley Creek, Dixon, and part of the park. My biggest experience, though, was, I think, our kid, this Bob Ashley. Oh, he was a corker, a kid, and we went to school together. They never called him a hog buyer, cowboys. They call them butchers. So this old guy come out from Missoula to buy hogs. So he started up here at Allards again. He gets so many hogs there and turn them out on the road, and us kids would herd them. We go on down to the next place that had pigs, and we'd get some more there. We got down on Dry Creek and stopped at the old Ashley place. We got dinner there. We had a bunch of hogs there, and then from there, I think we drove into the Father's Corral. Stayed all night there. Next morning, we took them to Ravalli. And potholes on top of the hill wasn't fenced. There was no park. These little pigs found that water. We lost a whole bunch for a while. I went down and got in them potholes. That's where they stayed. They got their fill and wallow and everything. Then we got them on in Ravalli.
How were the horses marked?
Huh?
How did they used to mark the horses? Was it branding or was it earmarked?
The horses?
Yeah, or they just know their own.
Oh, everybody had their own brand. Yeah, this Nina family, that's Mrs. Camel, her grandfather, he used to brand with a big YL. And Ashley's, I think they had a FA. And I think the Finley outfit, they all branded with a JF. Our brand was an MD. My granddad was a JD. And the fathers, they had a cross. And the sisters of Providence, I think their brand when I was a kid was SR. And then the Erskines, they branded with a dipper on the rib. Yeah, everybody had, of course, there's a lot of slickers too, you know. And that's fathers wanted. And the sad part of Brandon, or Rhonda, was after they'd leave our crowds, it'd be 10, 15 quotes around there. Mother either got her neck broken or the buyer took some there and cut out the coat. They'd stick around the trails a while and finally head for the prairie. I guess maybe some made it and some, I suppose, died. We tried a couple of times to raise a couple of them, but we didn't have any luck with it.
My dad had the same stories to tell back then.
Huh?
My dad's from the Fort Peck Reservation.
Yeah.
And they'd come through there on the wild horse roundups, and the colts would get left behind. It was usually running them, but they'd get left. He wasn't talking about the roundups. They'd move into Wolf Point around, to corral and ship. But they'd try to raise those colts, but they couldn't keep them alive.
I think my dad and I took the last bunch of wild horses off in Charlotte. Way down southwest of Charlotte, there's a place that drink down there, a little flat bottle. Every time you get near them, they just head right for them buttes. And the bay stallion with them, God, he was a pretty looking thing. And we had a mare in there. It must have been 20, 25 once. By golly, we started them and they hit the boots head of my dad, so he waved me back. He went, followed them over into Moise, and he took them out that upper end. Conco happened to be on that end. He took them over. And my dad got there, and they were just filling the reservoir. About halfway across it, and they didn't take right straight across the water, and we let them go. But my dad was on the other side. Got down here on this same road and run into a bunch of freighters for the irrigation. Got them, they broke fences there, and I think my dad and him got in on 3 head. There'd be 4 or 5 mule outfits, freight going to different camps. And down my uncle's place, Angus, he had, they rented his place and they kept it for horses. It wasn't mules, it was quite a bunch of them. And then they kept their beef there. And no guy by the name of Sturgis. He had a big hack team and a saddle horse. And every few days he'd butcher beef and then he'd have to deliver it to the different camps. That's the way they had their meat most of the time.
Well, do you want to go over to some of the McDonald places?
Yeah.
I'll unclip you here. Okay, here we are at the place.
Right down there, big trees. That's where our old home was. That's where we were born. And you can see the old road where it goes across the creek over there. That was the old county road. And come right off in the hill, straight about where Chicken Horse Reservoir is. And
where are you pointing to down by the creek?
Where
did the road cross the creek then?
See that opening there, winding through there?
Yeah.
Well, there was a big bridge over there on before the irrigation. That's where the old big creek was. Then we had 2 bridges right here where these trees are. And then our home was there where the elm trees are. And that whole thing clear down to where our barns, that was all brush and stuff, not too heavy, but all along there. And between this creek here and the big creek up there, all through that opening in there, clear down in there, was where the people used to stay over when they went through here. Like the Indians would stay there going to mission to church. The Kootenays would come down, they'd spend 3, 4 days there. going and coming. And then Camasbury Indians, when the horse roundup was, they'd all the gang up here, and right, I can't see too good, but right down there where them two big trees are, there, right close together, and one little to the left of it, that's where the old Hudson Bay Cemetery is. That's where my grandfather and grandmother and some of our other relatives are buried. And we were wanting to keep it, but after the irrigation started, table water come up and got so we couldn't use it. You'd start a grave and you'd hit water. So that's how we abandoned it and moved to the mission.
So the bodies were disinterred.
And right, you just barely see the old Hudson Bay House down there. And that's where we were at. My granddad was right across the creek where he settled in the early 80s. And then my Uncle Tom was right across the creek there with his family. His family come in, or his wife was a niece of old Michelle Pablo, and they, I think she was raised at Kamloops, British Columbia. Her and her brother come out here, old Pablos, and then they got married here to different ones and settled here. And over this way, there was nothing here. But right there where them cattle were, that's where our big corrals were. And then on the other side of them was the first corrals we had. And we had a fence that run clear up near to the highway, then straight down near to that other road. And there was nothing in there. That was all open, clear up this way. And the old road and take right off between them houses there. That's where it went. And then it hit in there halfway across Chicken Horse Reservoir and went up to cross Crow Creek there about east of the highway, about a mile. Then it went by where Doc Brooks lived in Ronan. And you come in here and along about noon, the horses would start showing up, and there'd be horses from way down there clear up here. Riders bringing different horses in. And they'd have maybe 100 so head of horses herded here, and then there's two big lots there below our place. We had some more trails and a big lot where they kept horses. And everything was open, and
So you were telling me also that where the old road used to go up there, there was a that where the old road used to go up there, there was a crossing that Indians used. Why, did they have a separate crossing or what?
The Indians?
You told me up around Crow Creek or something, that there was a crossing that,
Oh, well, they had the one about a mile above the highway, and then up another mile or so is where they had this old Sophie Irvin lived right on the brow of the hill. And there used to be a road that went through there.
yeah,
And it brought you down by old Chief Eagle's place and by old Hammers. And it kind of angled right straight across, out onto the Kicking Horse Road.
I see.
And that was, then of course them other ends, wherever they had a little road by themselves.
Yeah. So how does it feel coming back here today, Charlie?
Well, I don't. I never did live here,
Yeah.
but it's been such a beautiful old place.
Yeah.
Like there's fish all along there, any of them places, big trout, and uh, you could raise any kind of a garden, flowers there, and right across here in that little bench, my mother used to have some strawberries there and raspberries, and uh, and that's what I can't figure out why Joe never spent much time here and put all that money in that lake property. And he don't own the land. The land is tribal land. And if he sold out there, he'd have to sell to another tribal member. And I'll bet he's put $80,000 in there with his buildings and boat dock and everything. And all they do is rent this out. His mother has uh, living rights through the will. She passed away, and then it went to Joe and his brother Dick. And then Dick died at Polson, so I guess just him and his mother. There's 160 acres. And that's where Ed had a little log house up there,
Where that building is now?
and it burned.
Oh.
But he's got one of the damn nicest wells there you ever seen. A dug well, and you can get there and pump that thing. Never will pump it dry.
That well still works today?
Huh?
That well still works today?
Oh, yeah, it's a damn good well, a drilled well. And there's about 2, 3 fellers wanting to bring their trailer and live up here. This little part in here, I think, for a while, they reserved that when they're leasing the rest of it.
So who's grazing here now? Who's grazing this land now?
Delaney's had it. And all they keep it for is it's got awful good grass here, and they're selling weaner calves. Take most all this land now. Up there, see cattle up there, and they're all on irrigated pasture. I thought What was you going to ask me?
Well, I don't know. I was asking about bears, and you said that they never came down.
Oh, grizzlies. No, there was never any grizzly here. And once in a while, black bear would show up. But there was a lot of thornberries and choke cherries and stuff like that, and they'd be in them.
Yeah.
But this deal of bear coming in here, grizzly, they haven't done that only in the last 7, 8 years.
Oh.
And then a couple of guys fishing down there. The old place Joe run into grizzly down there. And by God, they quit fishing there.
So, who were your neighbors around here when you were growing up?
Huh?
Who were your neighbors right here when you were growing up?
Well, I'm old Finley's and my granddad Ashley's and Bushman's and then when the homesteaders come in, Sadley's and Hogan and Segrosky. Old Billings lived up there, and right up here are the trees. There used to be an old fellow by the name of Peterson, and right right down there on the point of the hill where you see all them trees, that's where the Kearns, three family of Kearnses lived. And Williamson lived up where this big bunch of trees is. And so that was our neighbors. And this place right here where this cow is standing, that's Doc Newitt's dad's homesteader. And Doc was about 8 years old when they moved there. And he went to school there and went to college there out of Missoula and different places. Got his dental degree and never did leave here. Retired right in the mission. Now he lives in California. That was the one blessing we had. We had a lot of homestead neighbors when they moved in. I don't think we had an enemy. Got along good with all of them.
You got along good with them, even though you didn't necessarily want the reservation open in the first place, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they done some funny things. Uh, they done crazy things. A lot of them got their patent and fee.
Yeah.
They took them down to the agency. I think that is about 1915 someplace, or 16 maybe.
Yeah.
Had a big blowout for them. They made the women put their hand on a plow and they did some kind of an oath. And men shot arrows out in the river. That made them citizens. Shit. And then everybody was selling their land like crazy.
So that was another way of taking people's land out of trust?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, You know, some big politician had some money and friends. They wanted to get in, and they'd get in good with some of their senators, and that's the way it worked. And all the Indians, they fought that opening of the reservation. That didn't do them any good. At that whole bottom there, and then the Cree Indians would come in here in the winter, and they'd set up their tents. Rancher wanted wood or poles or post cut, that's what they'd do. Then they'd do a little fishing and trapping. And spring break, while they'd all leave, go back towards Helena, that country.
Now, what years was that going on when the Crees came in?
Oh, along about 1900 and then through there. Because I remember one family was here, and my brother passed away in 1908, and she lived right there. Well, she's kind of the boss of a bunch of them. But there's so much history here, if probably could just think of it. And just like everything, well, country too, like when we were kids, we never had gophers or ground squirrels, whatever you call them. We never had them on this side of the creek. They never come in here to, oh, 1989, then they begin to get across.
A lot of environmental history, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah, and have their dances at somebody's place. And whenever they had a funeral, they generally never had their feast till a couple of weeks afterwards, or maybe months. And then they'd have a big dinner and give away the deceased stuff. Now they have their giveaway right after the funeral.
Was there ever any epidemics of diseases around this area when you were a young guy?
Well, the only bad one we had was, I can just remember, is when they had that smallpox outbreak. And a lot of Indians died with it. And they were down, they had a pest camp down there on the Mission Creek at that lower road, right across the road from the lower roadway. That's where their pest camp was. Outside of that, and then 1918 flu, I guess, was about the only ones we had that was really bad.
What year was that smallpox?
Huh?
What year would that smallpox have been?
It must have been around 1900 or someplace in there. But I remember they had that pest camp there. And we had an old Miss Percy cousin of my dad's that lived with us. And I remember him so damn scared that he'd get it. But what hurt the Indians, not only here but other reservations too, was they got sick and then took a sweat and jumped in that cool water. They just drove it back in them.
So are there any stories about the old Hudson's Bay Company you'd like to tell while we're out here?
I got to get someplace where,
Some shade.
no, not shade so much as
Okay. Is there anything then about the old Hudson's Bay Company you'd like to?
well, when we were kids, there was few living there, but it was out of here then. But different ones lived in the house. It was livable. They had a big old clay fireplace in it, and flooring and everything was good. In fact, I had a cousin and her husband. He had a contract of feeding a bunch of cattle for the Conrad Bank. He brought them over here, and him and his wife and two kids stayed down there in the old house. And that was in 1918, 19, someplace over there. Well, later than that, and then there was a fellow by the name Maynard lived there for quite a while, and then he bought a place further east next to the creek, and I don't know who he sold that to. And finally, Pack River got a hold of it. And but before before I can remember why, when they had the post here, my granddad first come to Ontario, Scotland, and he settled there. And the story went he got mixed up with some uh, big game man, and he killed his deer. So he got out of Scotland. They sent him out here, and the Hudson Bay at that time were down in Fort Hall, Idaho. So he finally got there, and they put him in as a kind of a roustabout, and then they made a clerk out of him. And then when they started to move this way, why, they had trading posts at Fort Colville, there by Kettle Falls, and this one. So I think he went to Kettle Falls and Fort Colville for a while, and then he put him in charge of this one. And he held it till he died. He died in '89. And then Duncan took it over, and Duncan run it till they all moved to Hudson Bay to Canada. And the rest of them, Donald McDonald and his family, they stayed at Fort Colville till, some of them were there still in 1910 before they come up here. And my Aunt Maggie and Angus and a brother by the name of Archie McDonald, they settled over there in a little Bitterroot, and that must have been about late 1870, because Archie died and got drowned in Flathead Lake, and I think he was buried in '86. So Ern and Angus, they continued living there, brother and sister, and they accumulated quite a bit of cattle and horses. And one time, she said they sold 2,200 head of cattle in one bunch, and they're all trailed out to plains, and that's where they're loaded out, like in Chicago, I suppose. She said she felt so bad about seeing all them cattle leave. By golly, when winter come on, cattle started drifting, and they still had about 50 head left. So that started their second bunch. And he was half brother to my dad. My granddad was down in Colville country. I guess got playing around. He had this boy. So my grandmother, when she found it out, she said, "You better get your boy and bring him up here and raise him." And his mother was supposed to be an Okanagan Indian. So I never noticed about 3 years ago how he come in here. I know he was here all the time. And by golly, I was reading the enrollment book here in 1905 and give his name Angus Pierre McDonald, half Scotch, half Okanagan Indian, and adopted by the Kootenai tribe. So all along about 56 or 7, I was down to Omak, and they were having a big stampede, and Indians had stick games and stuff. So I was out there watching them, just ready to go back at 12 evening, by midnight. Guy walked up to me and he wanted to know what time it was, and I told him we got to visit, and he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Montana." I said, "Flathead, McDonald's." He said, "My wife's a McDonald." So he went and got her. So she come over and I shook hands with her, and she said that I'm the daughter of Angus's youngest sister. Their name was St. Paul. And then I went back, my cousin had a girl, some other teenagers got killed in a car wreck right in this field on Christmas Day. So we went down to the funeral, and I got to meet her again there. But she's getting to be quite a well up in years. Next time I went down, I didn't see her.
Well, she would have been the daughter then of Angus's youngest half sister, right?
No, it had been his daughter, or his half sister, yeah.
The same mother, but probably different
Yeah,
father.
yeah. And I was surprised we had a visit, and then he told me where they lived. They lived out of Omak in a little ranch there. And I was going to go up there, and I never did. and my aunt Christine and John, the older brother, they were both born at Fort Hall. Uh, John was born in Fort Hall, and she was born on the Snake River. And uh, some of the old officers in the Hudson Bay married my grandma and granddad. So then when they got up to Fort Colville, they were married by a Jesuit priest up there.
Mm.
And then he was over here after everything was over. I don't know, when he died. And I think they said he had a fall. And that was the cause of his death. Archie died in 86, and he died in 89. And then Duncan was born here, and my dad, he was born up Fort Colville. And my uncle lived across the creek here. He was born over on the Dearborn River, I guess, over there, I suppose, on the Buffalo Hunt. So they were born in different places.
Wait one sec. Yeah. Now, I was wondering if you could tell me what Duncan McDonald was like. What was Duncan McDonald like?
Duncan was quite a reader and quite an adventurous guy. If something come up, he always was then trying to go there and find out what it was. And the first one I know that he made big run was him and this old Inyas Nue. They made the trip and followed Joseph's trail when he was trying to get to Canada. And they done that for a newspaper. And I guess he followed it there through. And then Whitebird and a little bunch of them, when they were surrendering up there, and a lot of them freezing and everything. And Joseph, when the children and women started losing them, why he surrendered. And a bunch of them got away, and they went to Fort McLeod. And I got Fort McLeod, and they stayed there 2, 3 years. And Duncan went up and got him and brought him down to his place at Ravallis. I stayed with him a couple of years and then went back to Lapway, Idaho. And of course, Joseph, his home was in the northeastern corner of Oregon, what they call the Wallowa Valley. And anyhow, they done the same thing with him when near Shoreville when they got him out of there. So he said if he could get to the Queen Mother, he knew she'd take care of him. He's just 40 miles short. And Duncan went there, and down at Hope, Idaho, there's there's a place they call Melamaluce Island. And I don't remember if Lewis and Clark stopped there or David Thompson when they first come to the country. But they're trying to find out where that was. So there's an old Indian in Canasperio, Cato, Brian. Old Duncan knew that he used to be down that country. So I got to talking to him, and by golly, he described the country to Duncan, and they moved camp and went down there and down. They didn't find the island. And there's part of the little old logs laying there, an American flag, and this old Cato and Duncan's picture. And I think right at Hope, Idaho, they got a marker for that. But that's the way he was, and he's a great reader and quite a thinker in ways. Just like they had him at Charlotte one time, the fellow was telling me PTA had him, had a big domes, and they, after it was over, one guy come up to him, he said, well, what did you think of the meeting? Oh, it was all right. But he said, I could take you over these mountains. I'd come out in the spring, fat, and you'd starve to death. Things like that. And they used to have him lecture at university, and he was no bugger that didn't matter where the chips fell. If he wanted to say something, he said it. And us kids used to go down there for a valley. Jesus, that is just like pulling hair. God, I thought he was the meanest, crankiest old bugger in the country, and I guess he knew he had the edge on us, so he just kept them. But afterwards, he moved to Dixon. My sister and her family lived right across the road from it. Her kids, he'd come in there and start something, and they'd just argue right back to him, and he'd grin and go on home. So there wasn't a bit happy, but by golly, I sure was.
Did you ever have a chance to go back to Scotland, Charlie?
No, I could have had a chance, I suppose, if I'd used my head. When I was in really good shape, I think I could have bought my way over. I had the money. But Angus, the one that lived in Nerada, he went to Scotland. And I think it was in 1910, I think, when he went. And Archie, or Bugs, Jim McDonald, lives at Salem, Oregon. They retired from that Chemawa Indian School. His boy Jim, when he was in the service, he was over in England, Scotland, and he said he got over pretty close to where the old place was. He says, I was just one ridge or something away from it, and I never did go over there. So Tom's daughter, she's the Marsha. She's married to a army man. I can't pronounce the name of it. A real Italian name. And they've been all over Europe. and the eastern part of the states, and he retired from the service. He's got a hell of a big job in London. So I was up to date Big Arm to a dinner her and her sister had, and she was going over to. They lived in California somewhere. She was going to spend a month with him at London, and they were going up to Scotland to see if they could find the old place. And then when she come back, she's gonna stay in her cousin's place at Elmo till they bought themselves a home wherever they're gonna settle. I guess he's got quite a deal, and so that's about as far as any of our families ever got to see on it. She said she was in Scotland once before when they were stationed in Europe, but she said we didn't look for anything. The only thing she says Ireland and Scotland was an awful beautiful country.
Yeah. Well, would you like to go over to Ed's?
Huh?
Is this the same as Ed's land here, or is there another place you'd like to go to?
I don't know anything else I could show you
Okay.
right offhand.